Coming up on the pod, we are back, baby. We are back from our summer hiatus. Excited to be back in our new recording studio. We're going to be broadening out the pod, talking about new topics. Today, we got a special one coming. The Mets celebrated 40 years since their last championship. The 1986 team was my original sports love. I remember watching them on WWOR. I remember my dad hanging posters in my room of Doc, Darrell, and Hernandez. And thinking back on that beloved team and contrasting it with where we are today, that is going to be the focus of today's pod. So I'm excited to reflect back on 1986, talk about how things have gone this year, and look ahead. All right, we'll be coming back with that. But first, a little music from our friends at Prosper. Hello, and welcome. It feels good to be back. After a brief summer hiatus, we are back in our new recording studio. We retooled a little bit, and I am very excited to be recording again. So what is on my mind today? Well, I've been thinking a lot about my Mets. It has been 40 years since my beloved Mets won a championship back in 1986, one of the more beloved teams in New York City sports history. The current edition, which is not a very good baseball team, celebrated the 40-year anniversary of that team. And that team has been romanticized and talked about via documentaries. Books have been written about it countlessly, but you're talking about Doc and Darrell and Hernandez and Gary Carter and Lenny Dykstra and Kevin Mitchell, Ojeda, Fernandez. That team had guts. That team had miles and miles of heart. Also won 108 games, which is a record for this franchise. Also completed one of the great comebacks in all of sports history when in Game 6 of the 1986 World Series, down 2 runs in the 10th inning, staged a comeback for the ages, which we'll talk about in a future pod. But it got me thinking, 40 years. I mean, as a Mets fan, well, there's a couple things. One, I do wake up frequently and wonder, why couldn't my dad have made me a Yankees fan? You know, I'd have 5 titles in the bank by now. 2, I would say this year is part of the Mets fan experience. We are always going through phases of excitement and struggle, excitement and hope, excitement and fear, excitement and faith. And this is a year that has really tested some of that. When I think about the big picture, there's really 2 names that come to mind here. One is, of course, the owner, Steve Cohen. The other, the head of baseball operations, David Stearns. And what's very interesting, and what I wanted to kind of step back and think about is, it's very rare that individual player performance causes extreme pain to a fan base. Players are here. Generally speaking, you're not expecting a mediocre player to perform heroically or to go well above what their expectations were. And while great players will sometimes disappoint you, their disappointment tends to be very short-lived. Owners and executives have the opportunity to really impose some longer-term pains on a fan base. And when I think about Cohen first, it wasn't supposed to be this way with him. After the Wilpons finally sold the team, Cohen came in with all the bravado, all the talk, all the, he was going to be our George Steinbrenner. We have money to spend. His quote, and, this is the quote that, of course, gets hung on him a lot now. If we don't win a World Series within the next 3 to 5 years, I'd consider it slightly disappointing. Well, it's been 5 years, and we are way far away. But when I step back and I think about Cohen, it's been a little bit of trick or treat, right? Certainly the early returns were really good. Hard to argue that, we weren't really happy that first year when the team won 101 games. And while we did get bounced out of the playoffs, still 101 wins, very good. At a minimum, what Cohen showed you was he was going to let his baseball team, his baseball people do their jobs. But if there was money to spend, he was going to do it. This was a marked departure from the Wilpon years, which were really kind of up and down, right? When I think back to the Wilpon years, what really fundamentally changed them was the Madoff scandal. It started to kind of break around 09, 2010. You found out Wilpon was kind of tied in with Madoff. They lose some money. And right around 2011, 2012, you start to hear, Sandy Alderson's come in. He's trying to restructure the franchise. Terry Collins is going to manage them. And it really had a very small market vibe. And there were no more big top of the market contracts given out. And when Steve Cohen showed up, that was the biggest fundamental change. All of a sudden, we went from smaller market Mets to top of the market Mets. And by and large, even though this season has been disappointing, Cohen has lived up to the idea that he's going to spend money. Even with the disappointment this year, 20 games under 500, pretty much a last place team from the jump. This team has the second highest payroll in baseball. So it's hard to critique Cohen in this regard. He lets his people do their job and he spends money when asked to. Now, where we could quibble a little bit is the people he's chosen to do their job. I think Sandy Alderson did a really good job for him. Really, after he bought the team and Sandy came in, that team in 2021, which went on a run, and we felt like that could be a World Series team. I don't think anybody was critiquing Steve Cohen then. Tries to get Theo Epstein to come. Theo says no. Things kind of fall apart with Billy Epler. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But we then get the whiz kid from Milwaukee. David Stearns, who had a proven track record for building teams, is coming home. He's a New York City guy. He's been a Mets fan all his life. He knows how to build teams. And once again, Cohen, he lands him. He gets him to come. And what we've learned about Stearns here over really the last 3 years is a couple of things. He's incredibly patient. He's very, very, I don't want to say quiet with the media, but from a fan perspective, he does not put out a message that's always clear why you're spending your money to go to the ballpark. He has a plan. It's a good plan. It's a smart plan. Put your faith in me. I don't want to talk about it more. And that approach works if, let's say, you're Leon Rose with the Knicks, right? Leon Rose does not do press conferences. But you know what? His team won the title this year, so hard to critique it. Stearns, for the last 3 years, it's hard to argue, just based on performance, that this team has not eroded based just from a talent perspective. And, it's very interesting because the first year, the approach looked like it worked, right? Some of the moves looked brilliant, right? He signs Sean Manaea. Manaea looks like the second coming of Chris Sale. And so when you come out of the first year, the whole baseball lab, the whole we're going to uncover talent where talent didn't exist and grow through the farm system, it's feeling pretty good. Nobody's complaining. And then in year two, things really start to fall apart because in year two, 2025 season, that team was very erratic. It would win 7 in a row. It would lose 10 in a row. Win 8 in a row, lose 9 in a row. But at the end of the day, they had a first place team in July. Stearns is really aggressive at the trade deadline. The moves don't work, right? Brings in closer from St. Louis, doesn't pan out. Brings in some other relievers, doesn't work. So then we come into this offseason. All of a sudden, our confidence is a little bit shaken. And this offseason is the one that really, if you want to just talk about strictly performance of the baseball operations side, you can take him to task. Chooses to not re-sign Pete Alonso, who, right now has, I think, 23 home runs and 70 RBIs in Baltimore. Stats that would look pretty good in this lineup. Lets Brandon Nimmo go, trades him to Texas for Marcus Semien. That move has not worked out. And really kind of mishandled the Edwin Diaz negotiation. Hard to tell whether Diaz wanted to stay or wanted to go. However, the fact that you let Diaz go, Diaz essentially said he never really got an offer from the Mets. And you replace him with Devin Williams, who's been, again, has not performed expectations. The moves this year have not worked. Put on top of that, brings in Luis Robert Jr. from the White Sox. That hasn't worked out. Goes and gets Polanco, who I liked in Seattle. That hasn't worked. had a really, it felt like within a 1 week span, he signs Bo Bichette, brings in Freddie Peralta, and all of a sudden, everyone, if you looked at the futures markets in sports, this team was supposed to win, upwards of 90 games, all based on 1 week's worth of moves. Both of those players performed below expectations. So, with all of the resources he has here, we misfire in the second half of 2025. Come into the season, and very few people liked the way this team was assembled. If you kind of look at the buckets you had here, you had jettison proven talent that could perform in New York City with Alonso and Nimmo. It didn't feel like the risks that were being brought in with Polanco, with Simeon, with Robert were really risks worth taking, right? Certainly it didn't look like that offensive production was going to be replaced. And then the Diaz for Williams swap, nobody was really a fan of it. And so the team has performed woefully under expectations this year. Cohen came out a couple weeks ago, said he expects Stearns to serve the rest of his contract. So where do we go from here? We're going to have another offseason of David Stearns. Do we have a lot of confidence that he's going to be able to next year rebuild the pitching staff? They're trading away bullpens. He's going to have to rebuild what's been a good bullpen, and he's got to rebuild the whole offense. You could say you have faith that he could do all that, and certainly he has a track record before this season that shows he can evaluate talent. But based on his performance here, it's very difficult to have confidence that he's going to be able to do those three things for next year. So when Cohen says he's going to serve out his contract, it could actually get worse. And I don't necessarily know that once it gets worse, if Cohen doesn't have to step back and reevaluate it. As a fan, I hope it doesn't get worse. I don't root against the team. I don't root against the executives. I've always said this, the summer is better when your sports team is good, especially for baseball. Nothing makes August better than having a great baseball team to root for. And then the excitement going into the fall of, football ramping up, a pennant race, October playoffs. It's tremendous. So I root for good outcomes. I don't want to see Stearns fail. That does me no good. But it is hard to have confidence that we're going to get a good outcome. When I think about the team next year and what to pin our hats on, it's a very enigmatic group of players. You've got some young talent you like with McLean, with Ewing, and with Benj. You have a superstar bat in Soto, who is one of the most gifted hitters of a baseball, but does not seem like a natural leader here. And when I think about playing in New York and leading a team in New York, very rarely have you had success when you don't have your best player be a natural leader here. When you look across town at the Yankees, right? Derek Jeter, one of the great leaders all time in sports history. And when you think about the periods of success that the Mets have had, that 86 team had all-time great leadership. When they finally recovered from the doldrums of the 90s, they had Mike Piazza, Robin Ventura, and Todd Zeile. Great leadership. When the team made the run in 2006, Beltran, David Wright, David Wright, the last great captain of the Mets, was on that team. And so my question is, who's going to lead this team back to the promised land? It might take a Piazza-like injection of leadership. When Steve Phillips traded for Piazza way back in 1998, that team was going through 7 years of the darkest period in franchise history. This team is nowhere close to that. But there is a real lack of leadership, and you need that leadership to get guys to perform to expectations, especially in New York City. And to me, that's going to be the most interesting thing about Stearns' tenure here. I have no doubt that there is a spreadsheet somewhere that, if you run it through simulations, shows this team could have been successful. He's very, very sharp. Nobody has ever said, you could never accuse Stearns of not being sharp. However, there is an X factor to performing in New York City. There's an X factor to setting up a team that has the toughness and the bravado to make everyone on the team comfortable to perform. ESPN did a fantastic documentary on the 1986 Mets. And one of the things that Darryl Strawberry said at the end of that doc, because when they won in '86, the GM at the time, Frank Cashin, he trades off Kevin Mitchell. He lets Ray Knight walk, replaces him with Kevin McReynolds and Howard Johnson. And what Strawberry said was, guys like Kevin McReynolds and Hojo were just kind of But in New York City, you got to be tough. You need to be more than that. And I can't think of a more prophetic statement to apply to this team. More than anything, this team needs an injection of toughness. It needs a Piazza. It needs a Ray Knight. And I think that, Stearns can keep building this team from the bottom up. We can have a very sustainable farm system, but you still need that lead dog to run the pack. Until we get that, there's always hoping for next year. All right, that is it for the pod. I want to thank everyone out there who listened. If you like this pod and would like to be alerted when new content is available, feel free to like or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. I will also be posting the video version of this podcast on my YouTube channel. Check back every week for a new episode. Excited to be back. Thank you for listening. Everyone, have a great week. Bye-bye now.